Hello and welcome. I'm King of Prussia, and thank you for joining me. Today, I will be giving you 5 quick and easy tips to improve your mechanics in multiplayer Europa Universalis 4 games. If you want to see more content like this, if I get to 50 likes, I will be releasing a second video giving you 5 tips on how to improve your diplomacy game in Europa Universalis 4. So, you should hit that like button if you want to see more. Tip number 1 should seem simple and easy at first, but I have in my EU4 multiplayer days, I have seen so many people who fail to properly realize this. Miltech is the most Miltech is the most important thing in the game for the first 50 years. You cannot skip out on your Miltech. Every single time you have to prioritize getting this button pressed, getting this as high as possible within reason. And if you don't, you will start to lose wars constantly. And the problem that most people have is that they get to Tech 4 and then they get their admin to Tech 5 and they take an idea group in the military and they fill that out because in first sight it does look like, you fill out one of these ideas. Quantity, you get a bunch of manpower. Quality, your troops all get better. That's so good. Defensive, you get morale. Offensive, you get your generals and force limit and all this good stuff. But the most important thing until about 1500, by far, it still is important later in the game, but it's the most important thing in the game for the vast majority of the early years, is to get this number as high as possible. And here's why. Tech 4, you get 0.25 mil tactics, 0.5 lay morale. That is quite the buff, as you can see here. Here's your morale, base 2.5 to 3, and your tactics would go from 0.5 to 0.25. That's a massive buff to tactics. I mean, obviously, it's a 50% increase. It's very large. If you fail to get Tech 4 early enough, you will lose wars to people who are on Tech 4 when you're on Tech 3 because they will just crush your troops. Similarly, if I Tech up, you can see what Tech 5 does. You get new troops, which gives you more pips, which just increases how much damage your troops do. You get more combat width so that you can fit more troops in the front line. And you get infantry and cavalry shock, which is similar to increasing the amount of pips your troops have. This is also a massive buff. Someone on Tech 5 will beat up on somebody on Tech 4. I've seen it happen. I've done it to people. It's tragic when they don't realize this. And even Tech 6, if I Tech up one more time, you can see Tech 6 is also important. You get 0.25 more mil tactics, so you'd go from 0.75 to 1. You'd get 0.2 infantry fire, 0.3 infantry shock, just big buffs to these numbers are very small. These numbers are very small. Buffing them up that much is a lot. And you also get barracks here, which just gives you more manpower so you can wage war more efficiently. And then you go up one more tech and you can see Tech 7, you get cannons, tactics, artillery exists. But at Tech 7 it starts to tone down a bit because the only thing important here are the tactics, because artillery doesn't really become relevant until later. I'll Tech up one more time just to show you Tech 8. Tech 8 is where it stops becoming super important, generally, because this is, the buffs at this point aren't that much. There's one exception. It's up here at Tech, I'll get to it, Tech 12. This is also super important. You need this because these new units in any multiplayer that takes place in Europe, these will give more pips. You can't see it here, but these will give more pips, and this Tech 12 units will crush anything under Tech 12. Okay, so tip number 2 is a little bit less self-explanatory, but it will still help your military quite a bit. So what I'm going to say here may sound a bit controversial, but just do not take defensive ideas. I'll show you what they do. You get army tradition, a little bit of morale. This is the only actually good idea in this whole idea set, is this morale. And a lot of people look at this morale and they say, yes, I will take this morale, my troops will be a lot better. But what they fail to realize is that idea groups they're good, but for an idea group to be truly worth taking in multiplayer, it should have some policies that you can pair up that are pretty good. And if you look into the policy, you can't see it there, but if you look into the policy ledger right here, which of these policies significantly improve your troops? Do any of them actually? None of them actually improve your troops at all. You get a little bit of morale and navies in one of these policies. So all this idea group grants to you is a little bit less attrition, a little bit less maintenance. This is really inconsequential. And morale of armies. That's all this gives to you. What people should be taking instead early game are idea sets like quality. You take quality, look at that. All this, you get plus 10% to all your troops in terms of combat ability. You get discipline, and then the policies on top of this, you can get discipline with economic ideas. You can see at the very top, and down near the bottom with innovative, you can get more infantry combat ability. This is one of the best idea groups to take first if you can't afford more troops. If you can afford more troops, quantity is definitely an option to consider just because of how many more troops you get. And also this builds into pretty good policies with trade ideas. You get goods produced. You can see that at the very top right there. If you wanted more dev cost buffs, you can see at the very bottom with economic, you get dev cost and extra force limit on top of this insane modifier. So really, offensive is good as a first idea group too. If you just want some good generals, you get buffs to them here. You get discipline and siege ability, and you get good. You also get good policies with this idea group too. If you look down there with, I believe, with economic, you get plus 10% artillery combat ability. Look at this. The lesson here is that defensive ideas, it looks good. This is a Trojan horse. You don't want to take defensive ideas. You will be crushed by nations around you if you take this idea group and waste your mill points on it. The third tip is that you need to have enough cannons. Simply put, you need to have enough cannons for your tech group, for a while, cannons are pretty useless in battle in EU4. They don't have many pips, but by Tech 13 and Tech 16, you need to start having more cannons in your army if you want to fight other players. You can see there are massive upgrades to cannons at Tech level 13 and level 16. I can show you in here with the pip numbers, and you can see how from Tech 10 to Tech 13 there are more pips right in here. That extra fire pip is big. There are more morale pips. Also, if you look into the technology, you can see artillery just gets massively buffed in fire damage. Really at Tech 16, although Tech 13 is a nice little buff. So by the time we get to Tech 16 right here, if you're going to be fighting players, you want to have an adequate amount of cannons in your armies. Even I don't. This is my country currently in the EU4 multiplayer I'm playing right now. I only have 12 cannons. I should probably have 15 per army. You should have about half combat width in a stack, and then you can combine 2 of them for a battle. It's just really important if you want to fight a player to have enough artillery, because if you don't, they will completely kill your troops with artillery from the back lines. Alright, my fourth tip is that later in the game, when you get high enough in tech, and you start to build out your stacks to combat width, or half of combat width with artillery and artillery and infantry, you want to completely ditch cavalry and don't have any cavalry in your stacks, and I'll show you why. Cavalry costs, if you look here, cavalry costs 0.59 per month, infantry costs 0.24 per month. That's more than double the cost. How many pips do they have later in the game compared to each other? Right here in about 1750 almost. Infantry has a total of almost 4 pips. Cavalry has about 5. There's about a 25% difference there. Cavalry is about 25% more like damage total in infantry. The key difference here is that infantry does more damage in the fire phase than cavalry does. And by this point in the game, especially even by 1600 really, the fire damage matters more than the shock damage. The fact of the matter is that our cavalry costs almost as much as artillery and does less damage. It's not cost effective. And to really maximize your nation's capabilities, getting into the late game, you need to ditch the cavalry unless you're some massive cavalry-focused nation like Poland. Although Poland is really the only example I can think of, and they normally don't survive. As you can see in this previous game, Poland was cannibalized by Denmark, Prussia, Austria, and Russia. Alright, and tip number 5 to end this video is going to be more of an economic tip to get your country into a much better economic situation. You need to build manufactories, a lot of manufactories whenever you can. As you can see in the same game that I was just showing you, where I was the Ottomans, I had built up a ton of manufactories. Look at all this blue everywhere. These are all manufactories making me a ton of money. My economy is one of the biggest in the world. I have over 1,000 ducats of income. I'm massive. But and still, look at how much money I can make by just clicking that. Look at how much money per month I can make by just clicking this a bunch. All that extra money coming to me. This is something that I know a lot of people don't notice in multiplayer games, is these manufactories are literally, they're more powerful than gold mines after you can start building them. And people who don't build them, their economies don't do well. They, for example, in this game, some people who didn't get a chance to really build many factories, like Spain, I believe, Spain's economy was a non-factor, complete non-factor. We can look in the economic ledger here, and you can see Spain. You can't even, yeah, there you go. There's Spain, only 300 ducats per month. Look, Denmark makes more than Spain, for God's sake. Denmark. You need to build many factories wherever you can. If you don't build many factories, you're gonna be crippling yourself, because they're the major, this production income that you get from these buildings are the major source of income later in the game. If being able to build these many factories means that you're not going to be expanding for a while, if you're going to turn down your army maintenance and not attack any other players, that's worth it. You need to get your economy on track so that you can afford all the cannons that I have talked about in this video heading into the late game. As a little bonus tip also that goes along with this, these workshops are really important to build in anywhere you put many factories. You see how much money can be made in some of these are not high dev provinces. These provinces like Kosovo, for example, they're just places where I put a little mini factory, and that gives it +1 goods produced, which is the same as a whole ton of dev. Make sure to build a production efficiency buildings for 100 ducats on top of your manufactories to maximize the profits from this extra goods produced. All right, well, thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to see more, you can like the video, like I mentioned earlier in the video. I'll be releasing a diplomacy tips video later on, and you could subscribe. That would also go a long way. I would like that very much. Apart from that, just thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you get better at EU4, unless you're in a multiplayer with me, in which case, please get worse and let me win. I'll call it quits for today. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.